What's up, everyone? This is Aiden K, and in this video, I'm going to be chatting to the big boss, Mr. Ricardo Da Costa, about what it's like to be a DJ, as well as what you can really learn if that's what you want to be doing and that you have a passion for DJing. So as I mentioned in the last video that I put out, somebody messaged me on Instagram about what it would take to be a DJ without having to produce music, because the reality is that a lot of kids nowadays who want to produce music go into production, whether it's out of necessity or out of passion for making music. And it was a question that really sort of caught me off guard for myself, because I'm very opinionated to the fact that you have to produce music. I think it's possible, but I think you're better off if you are making music that people will be able to get to know you and be able to grow your brand off of. So what I wanted to do was ask some other people their opinion and just use this time to get to know the people that I grew up being motivated by and being inspired by. I'm very fortunate that Ricardo invited me to the new venue that he's launching, and I just wanted to say thank you to him for having me.
Cool, man. Thanks for considering me for your podcast.
Cool. What I don't think a lot of people know is that actually, before I knew what sort of beatport or what pioneer or what deep house being different to tech house was, that the first sort of introduction that I had to house music was through Soul Candi and through the releases that Soul Candi was putting out. And I was fortunate enough that my parents would take me to Musica or Look and Listen every weekend or every 2 weekends. And we would look through CDs, and I'd take home like a CD or two. And the most sort of standout release for me was actually Electro Candy, because I didn't know any better of what sort of the genres were, but there was something about those albums, specifically the first one. And I mean, the second one I sort of got into a bit later, but the disc that you mixed on the second one, I think it was like my favorite one. And the first gig that I actually ever played was like an under 18 club event, like DJ competition kind of thing. And I'd never heard of a sort of extended edit or a radio edit. I knew that this music was dance music, and that because it was coming from Soul Candi, it was coming from Ricardo Da Costa, it must have been good. So I went and I played this gig, but I didn't know about Beatport or where you could buy music that you'd mix. I didn't even know what beat matching was. And I took this disc of Electro Candy 2, and I was trying to play, I remember playing 2 or 3 songs off of it. And I mean, I didn't know any better. It was just I knew these songs were good. So when I decided that I wanted to actually speak to other people about what it's like to just be not just be a DJ, but be a DJ and grow your brand from that, you were the first person that came to mind.
Cool, that's good to know. I didn't know that. We've known each other for a while.
Yeah, I mean, we've known each other because I've been fortunate enough to work with you. And I mean, the thing that strikes me, I knew you'd been DJing for long, but I mean, your career as a DJ has almost extended longer than I've been alive. I mean, I'm not trying to say it as if you...
Makes me sound old. I get it.
But I mean, that's for me, who's been doing it for 8 years, and that feels like a long time. I can't imagine what it takes to do it for almost 3 times that. So I think where I really wanted to start was just to give people sort of a background or context to why you got into DJing. Like, what motivated you to say one day, I want to be a DJ, whether it was as a hobby or as a career choice?
Yeah. Look, I mean, I think one of the reasons I've been able to sustain myself over such a long period of time is because, I never approached it. Back then, being a DJ wasn't really a career choice. I got into the whole DJing thing because I was obsessed about new music and dance music. At the time when I found this passion for club-based music, which took different shapes and sizes. There was high energy, and then the birth of house music was around that time. There was techno, and techno back then and techno now is very different, but there's a lot of similarities. I just found myself drawn to always getting access to the most upfront music. And back then, club DJs used to record their sets on tape decks, so you could hear them talk over the mixers and whatever. And I had a few friends who had friends that were DJs in clubs, and they would always get these tapes. And I was like, I need to get access to this music, because those mixes and the music that were being played at those clubs were imported, and there wasn't a digital generation at that point, so it was really difficult to get hold of that music. And there were these tapes that were floating around, and I'd have to record those tapes, and I was just like, I became obsessed with getting upfront music, and I kind of started to let that digest a little bit, and then went to a few parties, knew a few people that had a few mobile DJing sort of setups and whatever, and I became very intrigued, because there's a clear synergy and parallel to being passionate about music and then being the conduit to playing the music to people and having them dance. So I was like, I think I could be pretty good at this, and I became intrigued with the technical aspect of it, and never really had the opportunity to or an outlet in order to learn. There was no DJ schools back then. So my first attempt was, there was this one mobile DJ that was in the same neighborhood, and I met them via random people, and he used to import all his CDs, and he used to be a mobile DJ for parties and that kind of thing. And I struck up a friendship with him, and he started to give me music, and he had a setup at home. He had a pair of SLs and everything, and he was fortunate enough to have the best turntables, the industry standard turntables that were out there. So kind of got to play around with him a little bit, but it consisted more of me just spinning the record back, because I was just like, wow, this is pretty cool, but not really understanding the technical aspect because no one was showing me. And he kind of spoke through some things which didn't really make sense to me, but anyway, it was a daunting process, and I just left it. And then I started working one of my first student jobs as a watch salesman at Edgar's at the East Rand Mall, believe it or not. And there was a guy, Ian Alden, who was also working in the watch counter, who I'd been to primary school with, and kind of lost touch with him after primary school. And he was a few standards or grades ahead of me. And he was kind of a nerd in school, so it wasn't anyone that I really would socially connect with. It was just like we knew each other because it was a school and it was primary school and whatever. And we started working together, and we started chatting, and it's like, what do you do? Oh, no, I've been working here, I do this, and I'm a DJ as well. I'm like, really? Like house music, Don? He's like, yeah. Been playing for like 4 years. Now at that time, if you had been playing for 4 years, you were like bordering on being one of the pioneers of the scene. But he wasn't really popular, but he had been doing it for a long time, and he was just passionate about it. But he was really passionate about like the American house scene and the Strictly Rhythms and there was another label back then, Tribal Underground, and there were these proper house music labels that I'd kind of heard of, but I wasn't really exposed to that world yet. And I'd befriended him. We were mature and and in high school and whatever, and he had already matriculated. And I said to him, I said, look, can I come to your house and mess around a bit, and can you show me a few things? And he said, sure. And I went to his house, and he had these old hi-fi turntables, which had pitch control. The old hi-fi turntables used to have these little round knob pitch controls. So he had 2 of them, and they were very weak motors. Compared to what SLs are. The way you would operate these turntables were very different. And he would show me, he said, you cue the song, this is how you cue the song. So when you see people do this, you'd see the record being taken back, you cue the song, and you're basically trying to line it up with that song, and that, music has got structure. And he kind of gave me like an entry-level sort of understanding of how it all comes together. And I became obsessed. There's no other way to, I became challenged in order to learn how to become a DJ. And obsessed with music, obsessed with the art, the feel that taking out a record and playing a song that you really loved, the emotion that it evoked in you, and knowing what that could do to a bunch of people.
Yeah.
And having those short-term goals to say, well, I want to play in front of 100 people. I want to play in front of 300 people. And putting yourself in circumstances and that you know, you can get that sort of experience. So I wouldn't go out. I would go whenever there was a free opportunity and I wasn't irritating him. I would ask him if I can come in and practice at his house. And he had a brother called Kevin Alden staying in the same house, and his brother taught him. And Ian started to lose his interest in the whole DJing front. He wasn't really making any breaks or didn't play any gigs or whatever. He was just doing it at home. And his brother was trying to chase it a little bit more aggressively. And his style, in terms of his technical ability, was a little bit more creative, that I could learn a little bit more from him. So just by watching and practicing and asking questions, and thank God that they were accommodating, that, you know, that they would allow me the time to learn in their space and to be exposed to really good music, which essentially influenced me in the direction that I took musically. I think ultimately I would have come to the same point, but I got exposed to proper house music, classics like Andrea Mendes' Bring Me Love, when it was an underground record, not even when it was a commercial record. You know, guys like Green Velvet, which back then was a proper techno underground. You know, he's a bit more mainstream now. And it was before he did La La Land or whatever, like proper techno. And, you know, I was very fortunate. You know, from there, through my student job selling watches, I was able to save enough money to buy my first pair of turntables and a mixer. And they were belt-driven turntables, very thin platter, and you had to cue very softly or else the needle would jump. But it was my first set of turntables. And, you know, that's really where my whole journey started. I just, you know, every bit of spare money that I had would go into buying records. And just try to put myself in circumstances where, regardless if it was a braai or any sort of social gathering, or, you know, I'd say, look, I'll bring my turntables, we'll plug it into a hi-fi and we'll play. And I start to get a bit of experience in playing to people and seeing what worked and what didn't work. I didn't have a big record selection back then because I was paying for everything myself, and I only had a student job. So I rocked those first 30 records like you can't believe, to the point where there was so much static on them. It's just like I just played them over and over again. And I'd buy like maybe 2 to 5 records a month. Now just put that in perspective. Like today you get 20 songs a week, and back then you would really get the most value out of those songs, and you could only buy X amount. Yeah, I mean, some of the bigger DJs and established DJs would buy more, but you know, it was expensive. It was expensive, and songs had a longer lifespan back then. So I kept at it and tried to play every party and networking with other DJs, and you know, if there was a party they would book me for, and if I was influential in whatever party, I'd book them for it. And then there was a pizzeria in Boksburg called the Zuri's, which was owned by Phil Luzides, and he was a pizzeria with a twist. You know, he had DJs. He stayed open until 3-4 in the morning. And he started to get DJs there, and he gave us an opportunity to play there. You know, there was me, it was Mark Stent, there's another guy, William Watson. He gave us our first break to have our first residency, even though we weren't being paid. We were being paid with a pizza and a milkshake. And that went on for like 3 years. That was my pay. I didn't get paid 50 Rand. I didn't get paid 20 Rand. I got paid with a pizza and a milkshake. And it was okay. Like, the experience that we got there was invaluable because it landed up being quite a hot spot. It became like the pre and after Jaws, unless you went to like a rave club, which went on until, the early hours of the morning. But it became a bit of an institution, and we were residents. And then we started to extend on that and start to host parties and at Azuri's, and it just became a proper residency, like a club residency. And through that, I was able to get my first club residency at Flyhouse. Through Flyhouse, I was able to get into H2O, and through all of that, I was playing at ESP. I was playing at, there was a snowball effect that started to happen. That when you start to play at these iconic places, other opportunities start to come along, and you start to play at house parties and whatever. And
how long did it take you to get comfortable with playing for that sort of magnitude of audience? Because going from playing to 20 people at a braai or at a sort of like a mobile DJ setup to then playing at like the biggest clubs and festivals in the country, how long did it take? Was it a point where you went, okay, I need to start looking for these gigs and trying to reach out to these people, or was it a case of just being thrown into the deep end by association of the other places you were playing?
No, I think it was a hybrid of both, and you can't. There's no pill for experience. Yeah. There's no quick fix. So I built the confidence up from years of, playing at Azuri's was a perfect sort of training ground for me to be able to know how to play to a bigger crowd, and seeing what responded well and what didn't respond well and whatever. It was invaluable because that transition into clubs was more of a hunger than having to adjust to a bigger crowd. I was super ready to go to the next level, where it became an adjustment period, and where the nerves kicked in is bigger sound systems. Back then, clubs weren't engineered to accommodate DJs. They were just clubs. So the monitoring system was bad. You had to mix in your headphones, which I was always, and still am today, terrible at. I can never mix within the cue of the mixer on my headphones and get it spot on. It's never been how I've conditioned myself to DJ. I've always needed a proper monitoring system, and a lot of clubs had delays on their monitoring systems, and it became really challenging. So that was the nerve-wracking part for me. But my hunger and enthusiasm to get to play the bigger gigs and whatever, I was just now rolling, and I'm like, cool, well, I want to play here and I want to play there, and I just wanted to play everywhere. But throughout this whole time, you always wish to accomplish the most you can in anything that you do. I never thought it would be a career path. At that point, I was just loving what I was doing, chicks dig it, partying, whatever it is. And I was studying after high school. I started studying a BCom marketing degree. But at that point, I already knew that this is a real thing. Yeah. This is, I'm getting paid real money, more 10 times what I was earning in any student job. I already started to throw my own events. I got a taste for being a promoter and hosting things. So, I started to taste those different aspects of the business, but I was still always brought back to the desire to have music up front, and the desire to have it before anyone else. And that is a very important theme throughout my whole career, is that I then went hunting for a job in record stores, not because I felt that that was a career path that I wanted to choose, I felt that it was a career path that would help improve my DJing.
Yeah.
And it could start to set me apart from everyone else. So the first record store that I worked at was Mental Groove, and I now had an ability to sell music to other DJs, to order music for the shop and order music for myself, and have an opportunity to get it before anyone else does. And, you know...
Do you think that molded your taste in music? Having it first and sort of, maybe not your taste in what you enjoy, but in what you play, to be able to hear something before most people have heard it and go, this is going to be good, and then say, I'm going to play that ahead, a couple of weeks ahead of other guys?
No, I think there were lots of other influences, like, you know, Ian and Kevin that I learned how to play, and, you know, growing up listening to Depeche Mode and whatever, but being put in a position where you have an opportunity to order music, and when you're a DJ and you're passionate about music or whatever, you've got some sort of ear for music. But what sets average DJs in terms of music selection to the really exceptional ones is their ear, their ability to hear something that is constructed in a particular way that will sound special.
Yeah.
And I quickly realized that I believed that I had a talent in having an ear for music.
Yeah.
And that skill was honed in a record store, because what is the core objective of a record store is to bring in music that people will buy, and buy quickly so that you can get your next shipment in. So I became entrenched in listening to music over the phone with international suppliers, finding all the best music. And now I was in a position to say, well, okay, cool. When I go and play and I get some upfront shit, that's already over and above my skill set and whether people like my music or not. There was going to be fresh stuff that other people didn't have. Even if it was for a couple of weeks, it was still an edge.
Yeah.
And that was a massive advantage for me. I also, like, when I started shopping at record stores, you know, I felt that the guys behind the counter were the biggest cocks ever. I didn't feel that they really wanted, like, going to buy my first record was the most intimidating process, because it's like, what are you going to ask for, genre-wise, and is that actually going to be acknowledged as a genre to him? Like, you want to give him references, but like, you want to come across as being cool.
Yeah.
And there was, what was the guy's name? DJ Clint, who sold me my first record, that I actually went to a record store. And I think my stepmom, like, dropped me off, and it was very intimidating. And I just said to him, I was like, yeah, you know, looking like for this, and I started to reference CDs that I used to buy that he could relate to, and thank God that actually worked.
Yeah.
Because I didn't quite know how to, like, I said to him, I like house music. Okay, well, what house music? Okay. and I wasn't experienced enough then, so, like, my exposure to record stores was just like, it was a very intimidating environment.
Yeah.
Lots of egos and whatever, and I also just wanted to change that whole philosophy. So it was just like, you know, have bro moments with everyone, and like, what's up, bro? Cool. Like, just put everyone at ease, because there's nothing better than just a guy just feeling comfortable because you know exactly what he wants. So I guess from a negative experience that I had, I turned it into a positive, and I really put a lot of love and emphasis into the job. You know, it wasn't a career path that I was going to do forever, but for the time that I did it, I was going to do it the best that I could, but at the same time benefiting from it. So working in a record store definitely gave me a lot of opportunities, maybe opportunities that I wouldn't have had if I wasn't working in a record store. Maybe it would. I don't know, because I didn't take that path, but it allowed me to network a bit, service DJs with records that appreciated what I was trying to do for them, and they in turn paid the favor by booking me at places. And I'll acknowledge that, but that's life. It's about circumstance. It's about who you know sometimes. And the skill's important, but it's not, the best man doesn't always win.
Yeah.
Like, I may have not been the best DJ around and whatever, but I knew I was good, and I knew I played good music. And if I was getting opportunities through the place where I worked, great.
Yeah.
So I spent a great deal of my time working I worked at Mental Groove for like 4 years or 5 years. And then my my evolution or my appetite in wanting to evolve to the next step kind of wanted to be working in a record company. Having worked 5 years in a record store, I was like, okay, well, now I want the next challenge, which is to work in the record label business. I felt that the skills that I was applying to a record store could be honed in on a record label basis. And now there was a strategy to that too, because record labels had access to music sometimes before record shops. And again, it was just that next step where I was like, I want the best upfront music, and I want an abundant amount of access to it. So I applied. I started engaging Nick Berger at Gallo at the time, because he was promoting a lot of DJs, but I wasn't getting promoted. I'm like, fuck, I want to get in the mix.
Yeah.
Connected with him is notorious for being quite difficult, but hit it off with him quite well, and he started sampling me, and I started to understand what he did within the record label side, and I'm like, that's definitely a path that I wanted to go in. But I was still very passionate about the DJing world and whatever, and I was really trying to push my career. And around that time, production, there wasn't a great deal of pressure or expectation for DJs to produce music. I mean, obviously, there were producers that were DJs and DJs that were producers, but it wasn't a big thing. But it started to develop. The popularity of dance music in South Africa started to edge into radio, and the odd song was getting played on radio and not just on dance shows, and everything started to expand. And when I was a resident at Flyhouse, one of my mentors, DJ Scotty, the sweetest dude. Till today we mates, and he started to dabble in production quite a bit, and I felt very envious of the fact, but at the same time acknowledged that I was never really a very technical guy. I didn't have a natural skill set to adapt to technical situations. So
I think a lot of guys underestimate that when they get into this. They think that, okay, you can just get into production like that. You can spend even a year or two and you can learn how to make music. But the reality is that it becomes so technical as you get to a level where you should be making music that's ready for release, that learning curve to go from knowing that house music needs a 4/4 kick drum to knowing how to set a threshold on a compressor is like two very different things. And I think to know in yourself that that's not the kind of person that you are is exactly what the whole reason that I'm doing this video is, that there are people like that. There's a lot of people that might even say, okay, well, I have to produce and still try, but after 2 or 3 years of learning, it's just not their forte. Like they might not be interested in spending 8 or 9 hours a day sitting in front of a computer. Some people, as you said, your passion was being around people and playing records for them and like exposing them to new music. that doesn't really tie in if you're going to go and sit the whole day in a studio locked by yourself. So I think it's a whole mental game of going, is that really what you want? Do you want to give up all that time to go and do that? So I think knowing that in yourself is exactly the reason that you're the perfect person to sort of speak about this.
You know what? I was. I never felt that. I mean, I wanted to. I wanted to produce music, and when I started to sink my teeth into the whole understanding music theory and keys and production and plugins and quantizing and understanding, what key a song's written in, and like it's not a very sexy part of the business. It's something that I gave a good go. Scotty, I started to produce music with Scotty, and co-produce in terms of I was very much focused around ideas, and he was the engineer part of it, which is a very common, if not the most common way of music getting out there, because usually there's a producer that produces for many other DJs, and we had some success together, where we remixed stuff for in America. We remixed a very popular track, Samantha James Rise.
Oh, really?
Official release, got paid $1,500 for it.
When was this? What year?
2006. So, we had a fair amount of success with the production, but I never really was driven to learn how to produce music myself. And just, had a moment of realism that it was never going to be me. And I tried. I worked on music with Ryan Murgatroyd. I put myself in circumstances that hopefully something would spark. But it was just never there. I realized that my expertise was on the other side of the fence, which is using my ear to determine what's good and what's not good, picking up talent, hearing talent, and how that talent can be crafted into something that is tangible and marketable. That became more of a realization for me. But parallel to that, I still loved to play records that I loved to people, and that's okay.
Yeah.
I wanted to maximize everything that I could in my DJing career, and even till today, I'm still driven to play the cool gigs with international DJs, warming up for them. I'm still very passionate about the scene and the music and the craft, but wanting to be the best DJ in the country, producing music, I was okay with not being that guy.
Well, I mean, you've still managed to be able to play with those
Yeah.
sort of, the list of guys that you've played with. I was reading your bio earlier. It's like that reads like more than what people who have been producing music have been able to do. Everybody from sort of Axwell, Deadmau5 to John Digweed and Sasha. It's like those people have pioneered their fields as being sort of producer DJs. John Digweed specifically is somebody that I also look up to as a sort of tastemaker, or putting sort of upfront music first. So of all those people, who have you felt that you've been able to relate to the most, that you've sort of come into contact with in your career as a DJ?
Well, internationally, the one that had the most influence musically from what he plays, technically from his ability, was Eric Murillo. He is a DJ's DJ, and that's really the best way I know how to describe it. And it's not to say that technically he's the best, but he's pretty damn fucking good. But it's how he brings it all together, and I guess that's what makes each DJ unique, is how you can package your story. And he's very animated, which incidentally I'm not very animated behind the deck, so I never really felt that aspect of it spoke to me, as an influence. But everything else that he did in terms of how he constructed the music, his sets, the way he was able to manipulate the energy on the dance floor was extremely influential with me. One thing that he was very famous for, which was a big influence for me in the style in terms of how I played, was incorporating a cappellas and samples into your DJ mixes, which I've done throughout my whole career, and it's been a big thing of when I was playing records, I would buy a cappella records and drop a cappellas over instrumentals, and he was the master at that. He is the master at that. When CDJs became a thing, it became about how you can manipulate that a cappella over a song, and how you can, loop it and create certain things and whatever.
Well, did you embrace that sort of transition from turntables to CDJs, or was it something that?
Look, it took me a little while, but when the CDJ 1000 came out, the first edition, was game over for me. The way that you could just manipulate the song just through looping and things that you could do, that sorted it out for me from there. And then the cue points and how you can trigger certain cue points and loops and samples from there. I was just like, vinyl, what? Like I had no inclination of sticking with vinyl anymore. I spent a great part of my career buying records, sourcing records, and I still love it today. But would I exchange it for where we're at now? Not a fuck. It's what it's been able to do from a convenience point of view, from an accessibility point of view, and just, when you're really in the mood and you're able to drop different songs and loops, and it got me excited about DJing again. And I guess that's the beauty of technology. There's always something new. I think it's moving a little bit too quickly sometimes.
Yeah. Well, do you think that, obviously, as you mentioned, the advancement of technology has brought a huge ease of access to becoming a DJ? As you said, 20 years ago, you were limited to which records you could get and whether they were actually available for you. Somebody could have bought that record or bought every copy of it so that you couldn't have it.
No, it's a real thing. It changed the whole landscape because, just like you said, accessibility to music became a lot more viable for the common man.
Yeah.
The up-and-coming DJ could now, if he sourced it properly, digitally, he could have all the upfront shit. But
do you think that's made it better for the scene, or has it sort of watered it down, as some people might think?
I think that it's, and that's just because of how music influences me and upfront music influences me. I would have preferred it if there was a way that you could still have some, and there is. I mean, all the big labels around the world, they don't sample as much as they used to, or they sample after the song has been released. They maybe give it to a few key people, but they know that when it gets out, it's out.
Everybody
It'll
has
spread
it.
like wildfire. So I'm lucky enough to still have some of those relationships in play, but it's just the evolution of things, and you got to embrace them. And if you can't beat them, join them. But I do think the whole, technology advancements and whatever has, I think it's too rapid. People don't have an opportunity to settle on one thing for too long because there's just another thing coming along. But that's just life. That's life in all fronts, never mind just in the DJing world. But, I'm still pretty much a a 2-3, if possible, CDJ guy, 2000 Nexus, all linked. I use Recordbox, which is the Pioneer software to prepare your music. It speaks to the CDJ so much better. Most of the DJs I know don't use it, and I don't know why.
Yeah, I don't know. Just loading it onto the USB and
It
having
just-
it to wait for it to load the waveform.
It's a game changer, and how you can store your music. And I'm able to navigate my way around through whatever I want, whether I'm at a commercial club, I've got a commercial folder. It's just so easy and seamless. And I've never gone to the Tractor route or Serato. I felt that it was a bit too demanding of your attention.
Yeah, for sure.
And if it was about just having it as a glorified record box, why invest all that money into it? There are some DJs out there that really use it for its full capacity. And they're able to do some amazing things that is very difficult to do on a CDJ. And cool to them. I mean, a lot of the guys that produce their own music, they use stems and they're just able to get the most out of the Tractor and the controllers that you get with it and whatever. But very few locally that I've seen that really use it for what it's there for. So, one should not feel pressured to go any other way just because that's the new in thing. It's ultimately what it comes down to is, if you're a DJ, if you're learning how to be a DJ, if you want to become a DJ, whatever it is, all the stuff is all what works best for you. Ultimately, you've got a responsibility, which is to rock the crowd. And if you are able to do it in a way that is respectful for the time that you're performing, that you're not trying to steal the show at 9 o'clock in the evening.
Yeah.
If you can mature yourself in understanding that aspect of the game in terms of knowing what to play, when to play, knowing what to do when you've lost a floor, because every DJ in the world loses a dance floor. If you have an ability to rectify the mistake that you've done, those are things that will define you. What equipment you use, and those are just nice to haves. And if you are able to expose yourself to these things, then better on you.
Yeah.
And dabble in everything, learn everything, see and just find something that works for you. But you're not any less a DJ because you don't use a MIDI controller or some sort of effects module, a Remix 1000 or whatever. Doesn't make you any less. Ultimately, you're going to be defined in terms of how you can rock a crowd, and the fans or the patrons that are dancing on that dance floor, the ones that matter. You know what I mean? And they will define your popularity.
Yeah, for sure. How would you have gone about it if you were 18 years old now and you wanted to get into the scene as passionate as what you were back then? Now you want to become a DJ, but most of those vehicles that you had back then are no longer available to somebody now. Somebody watching this can go, that's good to know. It's inspiring, but how do you think you would have to go about it now to get into it and to grow your brand as a DJ?
I apply, maybe not. I don't have as much time to do it, but I apply the same ethos that I did when I was trying to hunt for records and whatever. I've got my tricks in terms of how I'm able to get access to music, or how I get to listen to new music that I can then maybe add to a wish list and find. I've got a system that works for me even today. And I know that till today, there's a lot of the guys that are newer, fresher, hungrier, more time to find music and whatever. And I know I still have that impact where I play music that they don't quite know, or it's put together in a different way or whatever. So focus on if you only want to be a DJ and you don't want to produce your own music, focus on creating a balance that is special to you. You know what I mean? Can you fuse house, tech house, and techno in a set. If you can make that story make sense, that's kind of your thing. You know, if you're a bass house DJ, then make sure that you get access to the bass, to the best bass house, or try and create edits, or you got to find an angle to make you set yourself apart from everyone else, whether it's producing your own music, which in today's time, if you really want to make it, it is key, it is essential. But it doesn't have to be the only thing. If you're not, you know, talented at producing music, maybe work with someone that can. That can give you, you know, a few tools. If not, maybe just learn some very basic editing tools so that you can create your own edits. Take an a cappella, put it over an instrumental, chop it up into certain places. You've made your own edit. You know, that would be one, you know, skill set that every DJ, you have to know how to edit. And you know, most DJs these days are doing their mixes digitally, so you know, you just make a bit of an effort that sets your sets apart from everyone else, because you're just playing music that various people are playing out there, just in a different order. So how are you going to make that memorable? You know what I mean?
So obviously in the sort of 23 years that you've been doing this, there's a lot has changed. I mean, we've discussed this now. But have there been sort of any moments that you've gone, I no longer want to be doing this, or because it's changed so drastically, as I said, it's now very much a case of the DJs that are leading the sort of popularity are the ones that are producing music. Has there been a point where you've gone, this isn't actually what I want to do as a sort of a full-time, I wouldn't say full-time thing, but something where it's not just, okay, I'm just going to do this as a hobby?
I think there's always, like, when you have a career as long as I've had and you've experienced different things, you tend to be motivated more by some and not so motivated by others. You know, where I'm at right now, look, I'm a DJ to my core, and I'm always going to make sure that I please a crowd. I'm never going to, oh, well, this is what I play and it's just what it is, what it is. I'm always going to make a plan. But there are a few really commercial gigs that are really difficult to appease the crowd, and you know, you got to, they ask you to play hip hop. I'm not a hip hop DJ, and the money sometimes does not justify the stress that you're going through. I often say to myself, like, you know, this is not why, one, I got into the game, and it's not really something that's motivating me at the moment. And sometimes there are people that are committed and you know, have the enthusiasm to fill those roles.
Because I mean, I think people underestimate how taxing it is on you and your personal life to be a DJ. You give up so much time, and sort of you give up moments in your life where you're unable to share experiences with other people because you're sacrificing it by going to a club and trying to please people that aren't friends of yours. There's no sort of personal connection. You're giving so much of yourself to people that don't really know you. They don't know the kind of person you are. So I think people sort of underestimate that, and there has to be something that keeps you motivated and keeps you wanting to do that, keeps you wanting to stay out until 3 or 4 in the morning and sort of go to clubs surrounded by drunk people. So there must be something inside of you that keeps you motivated.
Look, there is nothing better in the world when you have the right music and you're playing at the right event and the equipment's right and the vibe is right, and you get it behind those decks, and you say to yourself, that first song, everyone in this room is going to know that I'm behind the decks now. And that's something that's also like a little, like, trick, or I wouldn't say trick, but like a motivating factor for me whenever I want to get noticed or have wanted to build my career in having people know who I am, is when you take over from a DJ, make sure that first song, and obviously dependent on what time you're playing, but if you're playing a main set and you're in a room full of people, make sure that first record gets everyone's attention. And you put all of that together, and it's difficult. Doesn't matter if you're 60 years old. It's difficult to get sick of that feeling that when you know the way you've mapped this whole thing out in your head and how it transcends to a live set, you can't get sick of that, man. That's why you get rock stars that are 80 years old and still touring, because, okay, they're making their own music and the demand and the money is there, but playing to a crowd is the high that you get is difficult to get sick of. And I'm lucky enough to be able to play the cool gigs when I get that feeling. If I was just getting booked for commercial gigs and corporate gigs, and those are all necessary and they pay well and it's very important. You have to be diverse in our market at least. And especially if you're not producing music and you're just DJing, you're going to have to be a bit versatile. But it's that's what keeps me motivated, is that, you know, I'm still very passionate about the music. I'm still able to play at the clubs and events that is still at the forefront of what's going on in the industry. I host my own events, which kind of allow me to portray my vision in terms of how an evening is programmed, and playing those sets motivate me. So, I think I'm far from done. I have a joke with my wife that, she always asks me how much longer do I think that I'm going to be doing this, and I've been saying probably for another 10 years. I've been saying for 10 years. So it's like it's difficult to get sick of. I mean, I'm lucky enough to be a dad now of twins, and spending more time with them is a priority for me. But this is not forever. There's going to come a time where it's not cool to see a 60-year-old DJ. At least in our world, overseas in Ibiza, it's quite common, especially if you're influential. I mean, Pete Tong is like 58 years old, 57 years old.
Carl
Cox is 54, 55. But those are pioneers. I think I'll DJ until I'm 80. Socially and so on. So that will never really go away. But it's going to come a time where I'm like, okay, it's time for me to stop chasing the gigs.
Yeah.
And I hope that when I'm 50 and 60, I still get an opportunity to play at the cool gigs, because that ability to manipulate the mood of a room doesn't go away.
Yeah.
You may become a bit more nervous and if you haven't done it in a while or whatever, but it's like riding a bike. It's like anything. You know that if something is not working, you got to do this, and you know that if the energy level's there, you need to give them a little bit more of that. So I'm still as motivated. I'm not trying to be Tiesto, but I am very motivated to still keep doing what I'm doing. And I think there's a realization that when you realize that the idea that you have in your mind's not working, you've got to just say, just like I acknowledge that I was never going to be a producer, you've just got to say to yourself, look, there are guys that do it better than you. And just a personal life motto is that I want to do everything that whether it's walking a dog or running or swimming, like I want to do everything at the highest level.
Yeah.
So there's a personal, like I'm cheating myself if I'm continuing to do something when I know there's loads of people that should be doing this in place of me and are better at doing it. I've got a lot of things going on. We're at this venue today, which is a new venture of mine, and I'm motivated about different things. So if the DJing falls away, it's one of those things. But I believe I've still got a lot to give, and I'll keep at it and keep monitoring it. But it's definitely not forever.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the thing, is that you wouldn't still be doing this if you got into it for any other reason than you love that feeling. You love connecting with people, and you love exposing them to music that they haven't heard before. If you were in this for fame or in this for seeing sort of progress in that, as you said, like the guy that you got into it with, if you're not seeing that progress and that's the reason that you're doing it, it eventually falls away. You give up, you find something else, something that pays better, because this industry is not, if you're in this for the money, the likelihood is you'll give up after a couple of years.
Yeah, it's especially in the more white dance scene. The urban dance scene is quite different, but still,
That's a conversation.
Yeah. But you know, it's as cliched as it sounds. It's like it's all about the music. It's about having fun, and if you don't take yourself too seriously and just enjoy it, you'll be surprised at what the opportunities that open up to you. You know what I mean? Like, don't think that you can gun this alone. You know what I mean? It's not a solo sport. It's just collaborate as much as you can. Get friends bookings, they'll get you bookings. And that you'll be able to build some sort of momentum that would feed whatever drive you have for this thing. And take it seriously, but don't think that it's the be-all and the end-all, because it isn't.
What would you say has been sort of the highlight or one of the highlights of your career? Obviously, it's expanded. It's had such a sort of large expanse of 20 years. What is the moment that you can still think back on, like with clarity now, and go, that for me is stand out the best moment I've had?
You know, it's like it's this funny mind power, positive thinking and whatever, but like I was always very motivated to play overseas. I got to play at Ministry of Sound, one highlight, but probably the most significant was playing at the Love Parade in Germany, which was the first Love Parade that was outside of Berlin, which was in Essen in Germany. And there was a South African float that was able to get put together. And
a couple of people played on that.
Yeah, Leah played, Roger Deluxe played, Ryan Den played, Nick Greater played, and it was a mind-blowing experience because we got to play to 1.2 million people, and this float just went around into areas where people almost emulated ants. There were people everywhere. There were people climbing up light poles. There were just people everywhere, and this float would just travel slowly, and we would be playing music to everyone. And that was definitely one. It's just, I've never played a gig like it. It's so unique in its format that it's definitely like it one of the things that trigger in memory of shows that were highlights for me. That's without a doubt one of the highlights for sure.
Okay. I think one last thing I wanted to just ask you was, obviously this video, and I mentioned to you before we started, was one thing I really wanted to do was give people sort of a context of your career, because I'm sure there's a lot that people, whether they're fans of dance music from when you started, that know the brands like Flyhouse and Bump and all those clubs that you were part of, to the guy that just wants to learn how to become a DJ and knows who you are. I think the whole motivation for this video was to offer them something like that. So I think, to sort of phrase a question in a different way, if somebody had to come to you and look for advice from you, and they're playing like their biggest gig of their life in the next week, but they've never played before, they've just been granted this opportunity to play to 1,000 people, how would you prepare them for that with only a week? Like what would you make them focus on solely, rather than sort of saying you have like 6 months to learn the technical side of things? You have to have the fundamentals down in that week.
Well, look, I mean, if time wasn't an issue within that week, and I was able to dedicate time to them like for 8 hours a day, you know, learning the technical side is like riding a bike. It's repetition. So, you know, the safest thing to do would be to make sure that he was equipped with every hit, that if his technical side failed him, his music side would carry him over. But off the bat, I would say to him, listen, okay, let's maybe tweak it a bit. If he's semi-experienced, he's been DJing for like 2-3 months, and now he's got an opportunity to play in front of 10,000 people, it would be easier for me to equip him with some tools in order to say, well, you know, if this happens, this is what you do and whatever. But ultimately, the music is what is going to save you. I mean, how many times do we see DJs in clubs that technically are quite shit, but, you know, they kind of rock a crowd because they've got the music. So you can get away with a lot if you just focus on making sure you have the right weapons, and weapons being music. So that week with that person who's never learned how to DJ, it's going to be an intense boot camp of learning beat matching and everything else. But, you know, if he literally, and let's just say that those 1,000 people actually didn't know much about anything, and if he literally just dropped music without beat matching them, he probably could get away with it and no one would know any different. So, you know, it's circumstance. You know, if he's playing to an educated crowd, you're in a whole lot of shit. Make sure that my advice to him would be, don't even do that, because your reputation will end before it even starts. You know, and that's just also just knowing your capability, and, you know, a crowd that is at Madison and a crowd that is at Truth is a very different crowd, and a lot more forgiving at a Madison than at Truth. And I'm not saying Madison is that uneducated crowd, but there are levels. But I'm saying, imagine you're at a corporate gig where the people really just want to hear the music that they want to know, and they don't know much about the technical aspect of it. Equip yourself with the right music. Whether it's commercial, I played a corporate gig not too long ago where I had to play Afrikaans music, and I didn't have Afrikaans music. And what I had to do is I asked the tech guy if they had a small AUX to RCA, and I YouTubed Afrikaans music and I mixed it through my phone. I just drop mixed and then mixed it into the phone. I mean, the sound quality was terrible. Yeah. But that was a first for me in my career, and I then realized I must always have a folder of in case of emergency. And I'm like, all jokes aside, I've got an Afrikaans folder for the corporate gigs. Yeah. I'm saying, but I got paid a lot of money to play, and I needed to make a plan. And the only thing I could think of was my phone, plugging it in, and I played Los Lapi on my phone, and it rocked. And I improvised. Yeah. Again, it's like that's experience that you can't just take a pill for. So be prepared.
Something you can't prepare for in a week
sure.
is learning how to mold and move a crowd the way that you want them to. It's as you say, I've seen it happen a lot of the time as well, where somebody will come with that folder of hits and it doesn't work. There's so much more to it than just playing 10 of the biggest songs in half an hour. That means that
crowd is a little bit more educated than your, corporate gig crowd, and it's going to take some creativity and skill to get the energy levels up. And that's just the beauty of it. It's never going to be the same thing. So yeah,
cool. Well, thanks for taking the time to do this. I hope that people can find some meaning in it, and that they can take some inspiration, or just that they enjoyed hearing your story, because I think it's an interesting one. It's one that I think, because you've been doing this for so long, your name has become synonymous with house music in the country, so people consider you a pioneer in South African dance music. Yeah. So I think giving that context now and being able to tell your story, I would find this interesting. So I hope somebody else does.
Thank
too.
You, man. Thank you.
And thanks for having us at your venue.
Cool. Little sneak peek.